Good morning, everyone. Your Sunday weather briefing for this June 10th finds that there is one notable change in the forecast. I would consider today's forecast overall for the Corn Belt as warmer than I presented back on Friday, June 15th through 17th, looking considerably warmer than it did with Friday's forecast. Would not consider this to be any sort of a huge major change, but overall, again, my forecast looks warmer than it did from back on Friday. You can see this in the 6 to 10 day map this morning. Note that I have gone for a fairly extensive area of above and much above normal temperatures in the middle of the country for the 6 to 10 day period versus my 6 to 10 day forecast from back on Friday that showed normal temperatures for much of the nation for that same time frame. Note that there still would be rainfall chances. You can still see the rim of fire set up in the 6 to 10 day period. There would be your fire with your warm temperatures in the 6 to 10 day period, and then look at all of the rainfall that would be revolving around that ring of fire situation in the middle of the country. With regards to the QPF discussion for the 1 to 5 day time frame, I think that this forecast looks modestly too wet. I'm not going to post the big arguments versus this forecast versus what I've shown in recent days. I think that rainfall amounts, as usual, could be every bit as heavy or even locally heavier than the map shows. It again is a situation where I think that it is over illustrating the type of coverage that we can see, and that would be especially the case with regards to the solid area of 3 to 4+ inch rainfall amounts that it shows in Ohio and nearby areas. For the day 6 to 7 time frame, again, you can see the ring of fire situation with the heat in the southern plains really limiting the rainfall in that area, but all of the rainfall revolving around that heat in the southern plains. Again, as has been the case very much recently with these days 6 to 7 time frames, I think that rainfall coverage overall will be less than the map shows, but at the same time, rainfall amounts on at least a localized basis being a lot heavier than this map would suggest. Speaking of rainfall, let's look at what rainfall has been like so far during this weekend for the 48-hour period early on this Sunday. You can see that rainfall in a big portion of the Corn Belt has been extensive. No more was that the case than in far southeastern Minnesota, especially northeastern portion of Iowa, into northwestern Illinois, and into far southwestern sections of Illinois. You can see there that in the yellows, that's an area that had rainfall amounts in excess of 2.5 inches. Especially hard hit has been Saragordo and Floyd counties in northern Iowa. That's kind of near and dear to my heart, as that's the area that I grew up. That's an area that has had anywhere from 5 to 10 inches of rainfall just since late night on Friday morning. So that is an area that is seeing extensive flooding issues on this Sunday morning. That's an area that has seen a lot of wind and hail during the last couple of days as well. As far as the forecast is concerned, it is a forecast that continues to feature no shortage of rainfall chances in the Corn Belt for the entire 2-week time frame. This is looking at surface features as of 7 o'clock on this Sunday afternoon. Let's try to draw in some surface features from the two maps. There is kind of a stationary frontal system on both the GFS and European models that would be located in southern portions of the Corn Belt. You can see that both models are breaking out some rain to the north of that frontal system by late this afternoon. By the time we get to Tuesday morning, starting to see a little bit of a cool front moving into western portions of the Corn Belt at that time. That would be moderating temperatures in the middle of this week in the Corn Belt, where we would also be seeing some rains breaking out ahead of that frontal system. By the time we get to Thursday morning, by that time, once again, a frontal boundary has set up in southern portions of the Corn Belt, east-west oriented frontal boundary at that time. You can see that both models are again breaking out some rainfall with the position of that frontal system. The frontal system, by the time we get to Saturday morning, is then lifted more towards northern portions of the Corn Belt at that time. Bigger amounts of heat moving into southern portions of the Corn Belt by that time. You can again see that rains are still being broken out to the north of that warm front. I also see some cooler air starting to move into the northern plains at that time. And it would be that cooler air that would be creating some differences in the models as we get towards 7 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. The European model at that time would still have the cool air mainly just in extreme northern portions of the northwestern portions of the Corn Belt or into the northern plains, while the GFS model would have the cooler air a little bit further southward by that time. So you can see that the GFS by that time has ranged with the cool front more towards the heart of the Corn Belt than versus the European model. So a little bit of a difference on the timing, but even eventually the European model would drive that cooler air and associated rainfall further south into the Corn Belt for late in the 10-day time frame. So when you look at these 10-day rainfall forecasts and everything that I presented in recent slides, obviously a situation where there are no shortages of rainfall chances somewhere in the Corn Belt on every day in the 10-day forecast. There is going to be rain falling. On most any of those days, the rains are going to be significant or even heavy on at least a localized basis. And you can see from all of the models that they are breaking out significant and even heavy rains across the Corn Belt during the next 10 days. You cannot, as usual, believe the specifics of any of these models, but again, just pointing out that all of the models do have significant, locally heavy rainfall chances basically on a daily basis during the next 10 days. And when you combine that 10-day rainfall forecast with additional rainfall projected in the 11 to 15-day time frame by all of the models, it is a situation where we are looking at no shortages of rainfall chances during the next 10 days to 2 weeks in the Corn Belt. This clearly is still not anywhere close to a dry weather pattern for the next 2 weeks for the Corn Belt region. With regards to the temperature forecast, high temperatures for this Sunday, note the extensive area of 90 to 95 plus degree heat in the western, southwestern, southern Corn Belt and areas to the south of there. To the north of there, though, look at the extensive area of 70-degree highs. Battle zone between those two air masses would keep the rainfall chances in the forecast for the Corn Belt for this Sunday. As we get towards the middle of this week, still looking at some moderation in temperatures, maybe not quite as cool as some of the maps indicated from last week, as even at that time, we're still not going to totally eliminate the 90 plus degree temperatures from the Corn Belt, but at least at that time, they will be confined to more southern and southwestern portion of the region and areas to the south of there. Again, it is for the June 15th through 17th time frame where I do consider today's forecast as quite a bit warmer than what I presented back on Friday. Even back on Friday, there was considerable model differences in the details of the forecast for that time frame, but they have now all agreed on a above normal temperature situation or even much above normal temperatures for the June 15th through 17th time frame as we get towards Saturday. Note the extensive area of 90 to 95 plus degree heat, even some 100 plus degree temperatures, especially in the central plains, but even getting into far southern portions of the Corn Belt. So again, it is that June 15th through 17th time frame that I do consider today's forecast as warmer than presented back on Friday, with extensive 90 to 95 plus, even 100 plus degree heat entering western, southern, and southwestern portion of the Corn Belt and areas to the south for that time frame. It's just a momentary change in the forecast, so longer term still looking at moderating temperatures for late in the 6 to 10 day time frame and into the 11 to 15 day period. Looking at 500 millibars for the end of the 11 to 15 day time frame, you can see that any above normal heights, any sort of ridging just in far eastern and far western portions of the nation at that time from both the GFS ensemble and from the European ensemble. Some semblance of trough in the middle of the country, suggesting certainly not a cool weather pattern, but no abnormal heat in that time frame either. Internationally this morning, in Brazil, still a situation where the dry season has begun in northern growing areas of Brazil. For the southern safrinha corn area, still looking at some rainfall at times during the next 2 weeks. In Europe, a situation where southern portion of Europe, France through the Balkans, looking at above normal rainfall during the next 2 weeks. Northern Europe looking at below normal rainfall. Winter grain areas and summer row crop areas of the former Soviet Union still looking at clearly a drier than normal weather pattern for the next 2 weeks. A lot of the rain that is shown there going to be falling during the next few days, especially dry weather across the winter grain and summer row crop areas for later on this week through the 6 to 10 day time frame. Note that by everything that I'm reading right now, this dryness is mainly impacting the summer row crops in the region. The winter grain crops in the former Soviet Union are said to now be too far into maturation for rainfall to really be making too much of a difference in their final output numbers. For the spring grain areas, note that extensive rainfall is still going to be seen soybean and a big portion of the spring grain areas for the next 10 days, with temperatures remaining below normal in that same period. Over in China, very nice rain is going to be seen for the next 10 days in the soybean and corn areas of Manchuria, and that rainfall will continue into the 11 to 15 day period as well. Not an especially wet 2 week forecast for the North China Plain. Portions of that area have seen some nice rainfall over the last 48 hours, but clearly below normal rainfall going to be seen for the North China Plain for the next 2 weeks. In Canada, maybe southern portions of Saskatchewan getting a bit shortchanged on rainfall during the next 10 days, but otherwise nice additional rain is going to be seen across the Canadian prairies. Note that a lot of cooling going to be seen across the Canadian prairies already by tomorrow as well. In Australia, they still need to see a strictly above normal rainfall pattern there, and that is something that is still not in the forecast for western growing areas. Below normal rainfall for the next 2 weeks. Eastern growing areas, normal rainfall at best, and that normal rainfall mainly confined to South Australia and into Victoria. For India, the Indian monsoon does not look active for the next 2 weeks. Extensive below normal rainfall all across the Indian subcontinent during that time frame. That's what I have for your Sunday. Everyone have themselves a great rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.